All right, here we go. What's up, guys? Welcome to the podcast today. I got a special guest, Etienne. How's it going, man?
Good. Thanks, Joshua. Thanks for the invitation. I'm glad to be here and hi to the rest of your audience.
Cool, man. Well, thank you for coming along. It's just cool because I get to chat with people all the time, but you seem like you're a regular dude because we have a lot in common. Like I'm a musician.
Oh, yeah.
I played music for so many years. I did the bar scene late at night, and I kind of got over it, man, because those late nights and early mornings, and then I had kids, and my kids were knocking on the door like at 8 in the morning. It's like, hey, Dad, get up, let's play. I was like, that nightlife got old real fast, man.
I mean, it is exhausting, but at the same time, it's like one of those things that is spiritually replenishing. So it almost like
Sure.
balances out like the grind of it. Especially, I think if you're playing with a band and you have like a friendly connection to, those people, it almost seems like a break from the rest of, professional life.
For
So I,
sure.
I enjoyed.
Is it original music that y'all play or is it cover?
Yeah, yeah. Right now it's all original. We started out obviously playing covers like every other band to get,
Sure.
paid. But
Yeah.
then over time, like we just shifted over to full, like just making our own music, and now all we play is originals.
As what would you rather is it more exhausting to be a musician or what you're doing now?
Or politician, I think they have their own like flavor of gratification and also feeling of exhaustion. Like I feel like with music, a lot of the times it's like physically exhausting, like just moving stuff around and even like kind of being on stage and all that stuff. So you end up like drained physically, but you almost like end up feeling like psychologically like it's a break.
Yeah.
And with politics, it's sort of the opposite. Like it's like you don't have to do, I think, necessarily. I mean, maybe if you're like going around all the time, it can be physically draining, but I think the more like draining part is the psychological part because you really have to do a lot of active listening. You have to meet people like where they are. You have to sort of try to put yourself in their shoes. And by the end of the day, it's almost like, oh my God, I can't have any meaningful conversations
Yeah.
anymore. So it's but it's also gratifying in a different sense because it almost feels like you connect with people on a more like in a sense like a personal level, like you're sort of hearing all of these stories and you're trying to relate to them as as it comes to your experience and then trying to see like what is within your power to like solve some of those problems. So it's gratifying in a lot of senses. It almost feels like it has to be a much less like you don't think about yourself as much, whereas in music it's like, okay, what is in me and I'm putting it out there and hopefully somebody connects. Here it's like you actually have to try to connect.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right because I created a documentary off the March 27th floods that happened here in the Rio Grande Valley. And I went out to the community and I was filming and I was chatting with the people that had their homes flooded. And a lot of them felt like they had been forgotten or they were just not being listened to. And that was kind of the first time that it opened my eyes because I'm not boots on the ground. I'll film, I'll go out to places and then I'm out. But the opportunity arose to really interview the people that were affected. And that's when I started really hearing the stories about the people that were there. And like I'm sure on your campaign trail, you hear a lot of different stories. And a lot of that's draining. You take it into you and physically, emotionally, it's draining. So at the end of the day, it's like, man, I don't have anything else to think about. I can't think about anything else. So I
Yeah, it's
commend
like
you for that, man.
you're like you have to play the role of like a community therapist, but
Yeah.
also I guess like some kind of a like a collective, like in policy a lot of that work is like it's like you reconcile, you bring all these like stories together and everybody has a different experience, has different interests, and then you have to take all of that in but then also put together a more collective solution package, of like what integrates all of these things but at the same time like doesn't have all these like unintended effects or consequences, doesn't like maybe bring you all of this like I don't know extra heat that makes it more politically unfeasible to do, so that you're not like actually saying stuff like, oh yeah, I'm going to fix your problem. Like you also have to stay sort of grounded
Yeah.
and in what is possible, but then also I don't know, in a sense, bring your imagination to like solutions that maybe have not been explored so that people feel you are actually doing your job as a policy person, but also as a politician, like creating political capital to fix their problems.
Yeah. Run me through a day of your life. Like when you're on the political trail, like what does that look like? What time do you
Well,
get up in the morning? What do you eat? Are you a breakfast person? Do you drink coffee? Do you put cream in your coffee? You drink it black? What is it, man?
um, so far, it's every day has looked very different, just based off of like in campaign mode. I feel like you're always in like a an evaluation of the big strategic picture. And one day you have to hit like it's like, oh my God, the fundraising, it's gonna be, well, that one's like a constant. So it's like, okay, you got to make some phone calls, or you have to like make a video or something talking to like supporters and asking them for their help. But then you also have to maybe some days like meet with your team or people who are like integrated into the campaign and try to see what they can do, like how they can go off on their side and do some of the work for the campaign. So usually I start off like pretty, like not super early, but like maybe around like 9 when I actually start. That's like kind of my more downtime where I like to write. So I'll write on stuff like whether it's policy or whatever, something I've been working on. And then usually that time is like responding to emails, putting out like some fires that maybe have not been addressed. And then planning a little bit what's up next. And after like 12, after like lunch is like when you get out on like out there, and then you maybe like go and like shoot a video, or you like try to go do an interview, or you plan like with the team like what events are going to come up. Much of like what we've done now is like we've joined protests. We go to different like areas of the community and like try to like talk to some people there. And yeah, like all during this time you're just like also like planning ahead of like these opportunities like this that come up of like, oh, this person might want to talk to you or might want to like do like an interview, so you like schedule that in and then you put it into the calendar. So a lot of stuff for me, it's been difficult because I'm more of like like a I'm one of those people that just is kind of introverted, but I can be extroverted when I need to be, but then I have to recharge. But that means like I spend a lot of time just like in my own space, like thinking about stuff. So other people need to kind of help as well to guide me along and prod me over like, okay, you have to do like this part now. And then you have to like talk to these people and not talk to these. So that is usually something that I take as it comes, and I'll like get organized in the way that it comes. But fortunately, I also work well under pressure in crises because it's kind of been a lot of my life. So whenever a thing comes up and I just hadn't even planned for it, I'll like get in the zone to just do it and go in there and like give my best.
Yeah, you said that you think a lot about things and certain things. What's been on your mind the most right now on the campaign trail?
Um, on the campaign trail, I feel like what's been on my mind a lot is uh it's hard to square my view of politics that is tends to be more like the 40,000 foot view, which is as a policy analyst, a policy researcher, something that I have tend like I focus a lot on theoretical work. So I develop, theory in politics, both international but national. And that's kind of like the way I tend to view like integrate events into my theoretical perspective. So sometimes I'll look at things like going on, like for example, now, like what's going on with like Trump, which obviously something is up there and it's not being discussed. But then afterwards is like thinking about the implications of what does that mean, not just like at the national level of what could follow, for example, if Trump is indisposed to he can't be president or he can't take decisions, like what is that going to lead to in terms of all of the things that are affecting us now? What are the downstream effects? So I think those like kind of capture like a lot of my attention at this point, because we know like something like that will radically shift the landscape over all of these issues affecting the valley. But then also like you said, you're going out there and you're having these conversations with people's like personal stories, what keeps them up at night, what they would like to see different, the part that they would like to be playing in our current political environment. And those things often like also just stay with me. Like I'm thinking like, how do I respond to a lot of these stories? How do I like use them in a way that I think makes the campaign more connected to those problems, that actually responds to them actively and productively, rather than just be like, okay, I talked to you, cool, like I checked that box.
All right, check it
So
out.
yeah, so there's like the those very different like lenses, where you like take one that's a zoom out and that keeps you up in a certain sense, and then the zoom in, and that also like has its own like impact, also because I think you can relate to those more closely because you live that reality as well.
Yeah.
And then maybe what takes up a lot of my mental effort is like squaring those two things.
Yeah, it's a very interesting thing because the Rio Grande Valley is very special. I've lived here my whole life. I talk about it, and I think a lot of people think that I talk shit about the Rio Grande Valley with all the stuff that I talk about. But the truth is, like I'm stating facts. I'm stating these documents and all this stuff. But I think it's just something that people aren't aware of, and I think my goal in this is to create that awareness because the Rio Grande Valley is a very special place. I have children here. I'm married here. All my friends are here. My
Yeah,
family's here. I work here. My clients are here. So I am for the Rio Grande Valley, and I think this environment here. A lot of people don't realize that the environment here is toxic, and this is some of the stuff that I've been uncovering through my documentary, especially like with SpaceX here now. I believe you created a video saying that SpaceX dumps 358,000 gallons of industrial wastewater into the wetlands. Can
yeah.
you touch on that?
Yeah, I mean, it should be no secret to anybody that SpaceX has come here precisely because of some of the things that you noted, that the Rio Grande Valley is not just toxic environmentally, but also politically, in the sense that the political leadership of this place has been sort of hermetic, and like it has become a kind of like a hierarchy that responds more to leadership, like and leadership in terms of who is in charge, rather than like, responding to the public. So SpaceX being here is basically hinging on their ability to influence that leadership, and it started from, like Texas, the capital, right? And the guarantees that they got were basically that they were going to be able to do whatever, because the Rio Grande Valley, the people have no real influence over politics. They can, like, anything can be sold to them in terms of, like, oh, there's going to be all this economic development. There's going to be no cost. It's just going to be great for us. We all know, like, when we treat with like these massive corporations or like billionaires who have all of this influence, they're not coming here out of the goodness of their heart or because they want to connect with the community. They're coming here because they view our resources, or they view this, particular like strategic like port or something that catches their eye, and they know that they're going to be able to use it to their advantage.
Hmm.
And they're going to be there's going to be minimal scrutiny, and there's going to be minimal interference by the public. So that was all premeditated. We all know like how Elon Musk also operates. He's not a guy who is particularly interested in like what normal people like think or what they want. So once all of that happened, and once like he was in the door, we started to see like all those things that, the promises of like, oh, I'm gonna, it's gonna be good for the community, SpaceX is gonna do this, put this money into the educations or whatever, that started to fade away. And then afterwards, what started to happen was just like the consolidation of a place like Starbase, and like the sort of just like confirmation that Elon Musk was here to stay and this was his place now. Like he could do whatever he wanted. And little by little, all of these regulatory bodies that used to be in charge of overseeing what SpaceX was doing and how they were dealing with like the launches and like the mitigation to the environment and the securing like all these sanctuaries for the wildlife and all that stuff, they just started to kind of go way back into like the background. And in 2024, I think the epitome of that was the EPA stepping in and saying like, oh, like this, you're not even fulfilling like the US water like laws. You're basically just doing whatever you want. And they thought they could just like wave that away. And it turns out once Trump was elected, they could. And I think that's part of why like Elon Musk, like when the EPA had did those studies and then found that they were like SpaceX was in gross violation of those terms of the international like water agreement and all these kinds of things. Um, he pushed hard to get Trump elected. He dumped all of his money into it. And I think like part of what he was saying when he says like if Trump doesn't win, I'm like effed. Part of it was because he knew that he had that like over his head. And
Well,
it was like one of, I mean, people could have gone to jail for that, for what they were doing. Like it
right.
was literally releasing like toxic waste into the environment without respecting US law and with no consideration or no like proper diligence done in addressing the levels of pollution we were seeing. And then once Trump got in, he got what he wanted. EPA was gutted. FAA became his like puppet, and SpaceX just started to regulate itself, and started providing like bogus numbers, like things that look suspicious. And I'm not just talking here as like a, because I'm not an expert on environmental law or environmental ecosystems, anything like that. But I have talked to people who were working in NASA who are close friends of mine who have done this work for the longest time. Many of them have left NASA because of their feeling that it's been taken over by pretty much SpaceX. Is just now like kind of like a satellite of SpaceX. And they were like saying like the things that they saw did not square at all with the way NASA did things, did not actually match their environmental like promises, regulations, and everything was just being brushed under the rug. And if you didn't like it, then you basically had to leave. And
Wow.
many of them have been bringing this stuff to light outside of NASA because while they were in it, they couldn't even name SpaceX like directly. It was just
Okay.
stuff that they had to say like, yeah, this stuff is being done, and the numbers are being fudged to make it seem like SpaceX is good for like space exploration, and it's going to be like cheaper and more beneficial. And it turns out a lot of that was just a bunch of like, it was just a smoke and mirrors of a lot of it. And what we have now is a place that is based in our home, like is our neighbor, and has just taken up like total jurisdiction of an entire city and the law, like the environmental quality, and it doesn't even match one the scope of, like, it hasn't updated to what they want to do, because they wanted to update from Falcon, I think it was, to Starship, right, which is like the much bigger one. And they've kept like the same regulations in place for what is like a much bigger spacecraft, and
Oh,
it's going to release like way more pollution. It's going to like any problems that were there before is going to like triple or quintuple
jeez.
then, right? And they haven't updated any of those regulations because they don't need to anymore. And the stuff that they were doing, even the small amount of regulation that they had to face, but what was more significant, that they had in Los Angeles at a base there and in Florida,
Wow.
here they don't have to do any of that because the Space Force is not, for example, like a body that is looking overseeing like any of that. So it's clear that the reason why they're here and the reason why they're operating the way they're operating is because in Texas they felt like there's no regulation. All that we need to do is just kind of grease the wheels, pay off whatever politician we need to pay off, or like get somebody in our camp that has a position of power, and we're just going to be able to like, yeah, like do like, yeah, we did we did our due diligence. Here's like the numbers, but it can really just be whatever they think is necessary to provide.
Wow, that's unfortunate, and that's SpaceX because I just ran across an article this morning about the LNG project that's cleared for completion in late 2029. So hey, let's add this on now. So can you touch on that as well?
Yeah, I mean the LNG part, like, it's just the latest like drop in the bucket, because we know that there's all this like already the pollution, the regulation is just completely out of control. And now you're adding like all of these elements while you have no regulatory bodies in place. So I think like they're rushing it because they know like, okay, if a Republican administration or somebody like Trump who is amenable to them goes out of office, once they have all of these things in place, it becomes much more difficult to remove them, right? And especially once they have like certain laws that have to be rolled back. And one of them is like I forget what it's called, but it's sort of like there are these territories that are like deemed essential for national security. So you can't even protest them. You can't even like, so basically SpaceX has become a de facto like government body that is like key to like national security, but is run by one individual who has complete say over it. Um, and we as a community can't go in there and protest because then we could actually be jailed. We could like
Wow.
have, you get felony charges and all these things. So I think like they're doing a lot of this stuff, like, and they're rushing it through because they know like at this point it's like a free for all, and they get in there. And the only thing that might hold them back is if the community like actually organizes and says like, there's nothing, no due diligence that has been done here. Nobody approved this, no community input, nothing. The only thing we have are like these different community-based organizations like South Texas Environmental Justice Network, or all these others that are organizing people and saying like, this is happening, we're providing an audience, and we need to mobilize in order to have that stop. Because given what they've done already, this is just going to like compound to a lot of that pollution, and it might create a new cancer corridor in in the valley
Wow.
that we've seen happening elsewhere, where they've had these like huge LNG plants, and that, you know, the facts are there, the data is there. It's just a matter of time that they do it before they do it here.
On that note, I follow rgvhealthconnect.org, which has a lot of data specifically to the Rio Grande Valley. And that website is amazing. I ask everyone to go check it out, rgvhealthconnect.org. But I found on there some startling statistics and data. In 2023, Cameron County released 32,000 pounds of carcinogens into the air. And that's been going on since 2013. So from 2013 to 2023, there were 288,000 pounds of our carcinogens released into the air. And I have a feeling that nobody in Cameron County knows this. Like that is mind-boggling to me,
I
dude.
didn't know that either, so
Like that's seems like information that people should know. And when you
yeah.
compare it to like Hidalgo County, there I think there was only like 17 pounds of carcinogens released into the air. So like what's going on there? How can people get away with releasing this stuff into the environment and nobody has a clue?
Yeah, I mean, I think this just kind of speaks to the lack of transparency of a lot of these things. Both, and it's a failure of leadership too, because obviously, like people, you know, they have jobs, they have families, they're doing what they need to get by, especially in this environment that is tough for everybody. So I wouldn't expect people to become like environmental experts,
Sure.
or to just be like up to speed on a lot of this stuff that is happening very quickly. But like the responsibility does fall on our leaders, right? They are the ones who are briefed on a lot of these things by experts, and they're the ones that should have like that team of experts saying like, what's going on, like these kinds of things, like before they actually take place. We need to see like what's going to be like the long-term impacts of like develop. But the problem here, it's that it's all been just done like a lot behind the scenes, without like proper community input, without like the impact assessments, which is just like the bare minimum of what you would need to do for like projects of industrialization of this size. And what we're left with is then afterwards just kind of these, you know, retrospective like data of like, oh yeah, you've been inhaling all of this stuff, or your water has like had all these pollutants in there. Who knows what's going to happen like when people have, you know, like babies, or like cancer, like screenings and all this stuff. So like I really do think that that speaks to the lack of leadership here, where it's been so much more obsessed with economic development, regardless of whether it's just a short-term thing and comes at like a huge cost to both our politics and our and, you know, our health, frankly. And that's kind of the success story that is usually told, because also like we know that the media is highly, you know, involved with a lot of like the power players, and they know that they need access to them in order to sustain themselves. And a lot of the stuff that is more like worrying or could put them in a negative light is sort of like, you know, buried or not even talked about. And the thing that they want discussed, which is like, oh, it's going to bring all these jobs, and like we're going to have all this development, and it's going to put the valley on the map and all this kind of stuff, that is like, you know, right there, like straight in the cover. And everybody just kind of looks at that. It says like, oh, there's nothing bad about this, there's no trade-off, like this is all just good stuff. Let's
Yeah.
reelect these people, and let's, you know, give them the ability to just do more.
Interesting. Before we go on to the next topic, I just have one more topic about the environment. So the Arroyo Colorado, which is a 90-mile stretch of water from Mission, Texas, all the way out to Laguna Madre, it only flows because of the wastewater from every city in between. So that 90-mile stretch only flows with treated and untreated wastewater. There's banned pesticides that are in there from farms. There's a lot of chemical runoff. Most recently, there was a cotton gin fire in Harlingen, and they dumped a lot of this water in there.
Oh,
And
yeah.
this past Saturday, somebody that was fishing the arroyo sent me some video content about the most recent fish kill, and there was dozens of fish that were dead in that water. Um, I guess my question to you is, once this flows out into Laguna Madre, which I found with also again with the rgvhealthconnect.org, that 4 out of the top 9 places of the highest rates of cancer here in the Rio Grande Valley surround the Laguna Madre area, which is Rio Hondo, Port Isabel, South Padre Island, and ports. It escapes me right now, but there's another one out there. So
Mhm.
4 out of the top 9 places that have the highest rates of cancer, the Arroyo Colorado flows out into Laguna Madre, which is interesting because I'm trying to figure out if there's cancer clusters here in the Rio Grande Valley, and that had always been on my head. Is like, why are there so many sick people here in the Rio Grande Valley? And I think a lot of it has to do with the Arroyo Colorado, the Rio Grande River that's also highly polluted, our
Mhm.
tap water that is also highly polluted. We got these carcinogens released into the air, SpaceX, LNG. I, I don't know what other way to put a positive spin on any of this because people are always like, they always talk to me and then they have their heads down. And I feel like I don't know how to put a positive spin on this. What are
I,
your thoughts on this?
I mean, I agree. Like the issue, I think, especially when you're in this space, is that I suppose people don't necessarily want to hear about all the just the damage being done, but they want like, okay, well, what do we do? You know, well, like, do I just like accept that I'm going to, you know, that my children might grow up like in a toxic environment, that I'm going to like have to deal with like cancer without proper health care, all these kinds of things. So I don't know that there's a positive way to spin like an environmental like depletion or like pollution happening at massive levels beyond like what any other place is experiencing. I think the only thing that we can do is like, yes, we provide the data and show like this is damaging us, like you would for any patient, and you can show. I think you can show it in the data of like they're like our measurement is lackluster. Like I think like people at UTRGV and they have like a lot of like um their programs for like monitoring all this, and they do great work, but at the same time it's just not enough. Like we actually do need to invest like, you know, the what was it like the Arroyo WPP, it was a program to basically fund the green infrastructure in those cities. The Texas Coastal Resiliency Master Plan to like fund wetland restoration, like to protect the shorelines, all these kinds of things. Like there are programs that exist, but and those have like the intention of restoring some of that, which used to not be, you know, depleted, and that used to not be polluted. But at the same time, I think like where we're at right now is that they're not moving quickly enough in that direction, and whatever else was polluting is moving way faster. So I think like coming up with like the problem, I think, or you know, stating it flat out is not necessarily a bad thing, but we also need to tell people what do we need to do, like because we can do stuff. We can at work. We are like on time at least to like mitigate some of these effects, because you know, we're not like polluted beyond repair. We're like our shoreline is not eroded beyond repair. There are certain things that are going to need restoration and mitigation, but at the same time we're uh we're late to mobilize, I think. And part of like the what I'm doing as a in my campaign is like all of the people who are mobilizing, all these community-based organizations that are filling in the gaps that the government refuses to, or that is dragging its feet on because it doesn't, you know, because it prioritizes economic development of not of normal people, but of like these giant interests. All of those things like are being pushed back on by certain people in the community that know what is happening. So those people need to be empowered. They need to have like a much louder voice, and they need to be able to like tell people like, okay, you know, you can move with us. We can move these policies ahead. We can push them. We can go to the Capitol. We can, you know, raise a fuss. But really, the only thing that is going to, I think, put a damper on what's happening and actually move it in the direction of restoration rather than depletion is if people are shown a path forward through grassroots mobilization and through specific policies that they want to see implemented, and like backstops as well to this kind of continued degradation that they see just happening and that they feel like they can't do anything about.
Yeah, I think that's what a lot of people feel like. It's just their hands are tied and they can't do much about it. But thank you for that. So it is a possibility to get this cleaned.
I think there is like at least like what is being shown in some of the studies. Like I had a very close relationship with one of the leading like climate change experts. His name is Rob Limpert at Rand Corporation, and he like when I asked him, like frankly, we did a class like in Princeton where he was the one who was like speaking to the students on like the stuff that they were seeing in terms of climate resilience and climate change. And when I asked him like straight up, because it just, for a while when you get like a lecture on climate change, it's a lot of doom and gloom, right? You start feeling like, what are we even doing, man? Like it's just
Yeah.
all headed downhill then. And he was like saying, no, I mean, um, I'm a cautious optimist. And I think that's like kind of the way that I also view a lot of these things, that it's like we human beings have this extraordinary ability uh, to collectively achieve things that seem impossible in a short amount of time when we collectively push in that direction. So
Right.
I think that's what we're trying to build here. That is like we can actually do a lot. Like it could be a space race, like the green technology and like enacting like a Green New Deal can be like the new space race of the world. And that technology that we can develop and those methods that we can develop and leverage when they move like consistently and harmoniously in the direction of restoration and mitigation, it's not just a national effort that could actually lead to these cycles, like virtuous cycles of, like at least protection and like restoration, but it's like international. Like we can actually do it like with cooperation, and those things compound on each other. So I think we need to get to that place where we view this thing as like this has to be a collective effort, and we need to like focus a lot of our energy on this thing, which is like I think the most critical issue of our time. But
Yeah.
we need to do it fast. And when we do that, like when we do make it like the new space race rather than like the billionaire space race, then we are going to be able to achieve a lot of like steps very quickly. But we need to get to that point, like as like in the policy sense and in the psychological sense, that people feel inspired to do it.
Yeah, no, I agree with you on that. Okay, so assume I'm a dumb ape here in a suit. Explain to me what gerrymandering is and why it affects our area.
Okay, so gerrymandering is basically the dilution of a certain group or a certain vote share with the redistricting of certain area. So like every area, every district has like it's like a winner take all situation, right? So when that area, like let's say for example, it votes 60% for Republicans and 40% Democrats, they get a Republican in the seat. Obviously, if this area is the opposite, let's say, for example, it's got like 60-40 going for Democrats or Republicans, then, this one gets a Democratic seat, this one gets a Republican seat. But if Republicans, let's say, for example, are in charge, then they might be able to be like, oh, well, we have way too many Republicans here. Like, we're going to win that election easy next time. Let's actually eat into the vote share of Democrats here by like shifting this segment over here and then having that be more of a leaning Republican area. So they like screw with the lines in order to create the illusion of this area also being majority Republican and this area staying Republican. So basically the party in power moves the maps in order to choose their voters rather than the voters choosing them. And that way, even if the votes stay exactly the same, you would get like two red vote representatives rather than one and one. And that's really what we've been experiencing in Texas for the longest time. I think Texas, I don't, probably people are familiar that a majority of Texans actually register as Democrat, a large majority of Democrat, and that's not reflected in the representation. There's more Republican, way more Republican representation. And that all only gets compounded when you get into these historically marginalized communities like our own, which are heavily Latino or heavily any other that are heavily Black. Those tend to vote Democrat, and they've historically sort of been like just cut in weird ways in order to just kind of leave them as isolated and as like suppressed as possible with like the blocks of Republicans that exist. So
Yeah.
it's really just a distortion of how people vote.
Interesting. Yeah, because I saw the map and I was like, McAllen has like a little square in there and then it goes this way. And I was like,
Yeah.
what's
I
he
mean,
talking
Hidalgo,
about?
up until the last map, like it was already heavily gerrymandered because 34, which is where I'm campaigning, normally you have, an entire city, right, being represented
Right.
in a certain district. That's just the logical thing to do. It's like this is a block of voters. They are in a district. But Mission and Edinburgh, all that cluster, which is kind of just, maybe all McAllen, greater area, um, it was just like cut in half. So
Yeah.
half of McAllen was voting in 34, and people were like, oh, yeah, I think my street I still get to vote for you. And others are like, oh no, I'm like 2 blocks like over on 15 or whatever. So I can't vote, but I can campaign because if I walk over, like I can knock on doors in 34. So it was just like this really weird, strange like distribution of like how they chose. And it's obviously motivated politically. It doesn't make any reasonable sense because if you had an independent districting body, they would say like, okay, this corresponds like a joint population, right? And this corresponds to another. And that's actually written into the laws. And that's why, like, a lot of the times when there are lawsuits against gerrymandering, yeah, they get rolled back by Supreme Court, but then eventually Texan politicians find a way to do it again. And then I don't know, it just becomes like this sort of like you're fighting like these things that should be really well established within the rules of the game.
Interesting. Yeah. So you're on the campaign trail. What do you see as far as the age demographics? Are you seeing a lot of younger people? Because obviously you're a younger person, right? So are you seeing like your age group or maybe even younger? Because I know when I went to the McAllen protest, there was tons of young people, and I was like, this is cool. Like this is awesome.
Yeah.
And then I saw the older people as well, but it was seems like the younger people really had that voice, that fire inside them. What are you seeing on your end?
So what I see is yes, like definitely young people, they have their own sort of issues that are like really kind of close to them and like that move them politically. And they have almost what has been difficult is like they have almost like a bubble, right? That they sort of feel like their own scene is disconnected to the rest of like what the valley does politically.
Hmm.
But then it's almost kind of like an illusion because like I go to like meetings or I go to like places where they're like protests, like in Harlingen, and it tends to be like people who go out consistently like protests and like who are going to town halls and that sort of stuff. They tend to be more like middle age, like maybe 40s, 30s, whatnot. And like the other like younger people, they have their own sort of style of mobilization, and it sort of concentrates like university in certain areas where they live. And I think that they're very active, but a lot of the times like they also feel like kind of sidelined, and they sort of stick to those areas. So part of like the approach of my campaign is I've engaged with them separately, and I know, like for example, I'm a part of DSA, the RGV chapter, which is Democratic Socialists of America, and we have a group which is DSA, and then we have YDSA, which is like the young, Democratic Socialists of America, and they are super active in organizing events and like get out the vote campaigns, all these, and their membership is huge, whereas like DSA relatively lower. So like clearly they have a lot of mobilizing energy and experience, but a lot of the times they sort of do things like separately. So part of the challenge of this campaign is like bridging those two things, because in reality, even if like some young people have different priorities, they align very closely with a lot of the needs and like the like universal programs like universal health care. Of course, like whether you're middle aged or whether you're a young person or whether you're an old person, that benefits everybody and is like, I think, shared across the board as something that would be beneficial to all of us. So rather than have it be like a demographic thing, we like the challenge of this one is to bridge those two and have them work in tandem with one another.
Interesting. Yeah, that's an interesting thought because they're obviously about the same topic. They're going after the same thing, and I ran into that too because I'm not really an environmentalist. I guess I'm not labeled an environmentalist, but the things I talk about have a lot to do with the environment, and obviously I'm for the safety and the cleanness of our environment. And I also found that like because I'm kind of like outside of the bubble with everybody. So I don't really attend these meetings of like the environmental people that are talking about these things, but I've been invited. But I also find that like I'm on a certain side where they don't agree with the way I do things sometimes because I'm very controversial. I guess controversy accelerates message, which is I'm a digital marketer, so I'm taught marketing and advertising. So I kind
Right.
of approach everything that I do with a little bit of that, so has some like viral effect to it, right? But a lot of it is like they don't agree with certain things that I do or certain things that I talk about, but we're all after the same thing, which is very strange to me. But it's a weird feeling to feel like that because I always felt like I'm out of place everywhere. Like,
Well, the thing with like the way young people approach their policy preferences or whatever like actually keeps them up at night is that they do it like with a passion and with like a conviction that a lot of the times is lacking in like other, because like I think as sometimes like adults we also sort of hide behind this sort of the oh like what's politically feasible, what's practical, and oh like what steps on too many toes and all these things, even though you know that the right thing is we need to get to this place. And young people, I think they also, apart from having all this passion, they have like energy and imagination. And a lot of them won't settle for anything less than what they're, or they don't want to settle for anything. And I think like that's a that's a welcome energy right now in the place where we're at as a society, because clearly the way that we've been doing things, which is like, oh, like we, put a couple of band-aids here, the
right.
system fundamentally works, we just got to like tweak it or whatever, which is sort of the disconnect that has happened with the Democratic Party and young people who are much much more progressive than the leadership. um, but the fact of the matter is I think they're right, like they're right in their energy, they're right in like the sense of emergency that they have over the environment, over the genocide in Gaza, over over protection of the vulnerable, of like LGBTQ, all these things like that, or that they know that it shouldn't be as like politically like toxic to talk about certain things in a way that might like ruffle feathers or anything like that. In your case, maybe you ruffle their feathers in a way that they don't agree with the I don't know, with the policy that you're supporting or something like that. But maybe I think it's just that maybe they see their viewpoint as like we need to hold strong on this one, because otherwise we're going to just continue getting like the band-aid stuff, we're going to continue getting. So I think it comes from the right place, and I think that energy is really what we are going to need going forward to actually move towards like a different paradigm, a different way of doing politics that is much more focused on like what do I need and what do I want to see implemented, rather than like doing politicians excuses for them, which is what we've tended to do, which is like, oh, but that's not going to play well with this population. Oh, but then like, like the APAC is going to like, go after you if you do this or you do that. It's like, well, it doesn't matter. Like you have to actually provide the way forward. You have to be the one who is like showing, like building the political capital, rather than just like saying like, this is what people think, even if it's misguided, let me just do that and like try to get another 2 years, 3 4 years in office or whatever.
Yeah. I feel like there's a huge disconnect between the older demographic and the younger demographic, even though like the older demographic will say like, oh, these kids are lazy, they don't do anything, go fight a war and then you can have all the courage you want. And then the young people are like they're fighting back. So I feel like there's something there that's like stopping everybody from just going forward. But on a
But
different
part of it is like sort of like the thinking of like, you guys don't know what it was like to like struggle, go fight a war or whatever. It's like, well, they understand like I don't want to fight a war, and nobody should be fighting a war. Like that should be the position. Like it shouldn't actually be like, let's match the suffering. Like the whole goal of this society is like, let's move forward. We know they're like, we've advanced as a society in different, technological fields in our solution like space. And we know, for example, that we are doing things that are just like an automation mode where we're like, okay, like the, criminal justice system doesn't work. Let's just continue the way that it is. Immigration system is broken. Let's continue because that's the way we've always done it. And I think like they also realize, which is sort of what we're like, as a policy person, I've taught them to realize that it's like so many of the things that we have in place are just out of a sense of momentum and of like status quo bias of like, this is the way we've always done it. But when you dig deep into it and you find that that solution is actually a lot of the times not really a solution or is actually, detrimental in the longer run, then you have to have the courage to say like, even if that's the way we've always done it, the landscape has changed and it's no longer fixing what it was meant to be fixing, or actually it's causing serious damage, which is, for example, in terms of foreign policy. Yeah, we're going over abroad, we're ruffling all these like feathers elsewhere. We're basically going and, being complicit in a lot of atrocities. And then we come back and we're like, why are all these people hating us? Why are we like receiving, for example, waves of asylum seekers? Why, all these things like actually have an explanation. And if we dig deep into the policy, that's where we find like, yeah, we can change things, but we can't just like accept the terms as we've been given.
Right. That's interesting. I was talking to Richard Cortez, Hidalgo County judge, a few years back, and he was talking about a large percentage of the young people that leave the Rio Grande Valley for better opportunities. I was kind of startled at that because I've heard that too. It's like you got to leave the valley to make it. But then again, a lot of people leave, they come back, and a lot of people love the Rio Grande Valley, so they work out of here. What are your thoughts on that? Do people have to leave the Rio Grande Valley to become successful, to find a better job, a better paying job?
I mean, I'm always like a an advocate for leaving at least for a while, like your comfort zone and getting to know the world. I think so. I'm binational. Like I've been going back and forth like in the border my entire life. So I've lived in Monterrey, I've lived in Brownsville, and the Valley has been obviously my base for the longest time. But I've also like lived abroad, and I've lived in Los Angeles, I lived in Princeton, and these different areas, like I think, give you a different exposure to a wider set of realities, and it allows you, I think, to also think about how problems like happen in a collective sense. And experiencing somebody else's reality really does, I think, make you more equipped to adapt to different circumstances, but also like enriches your life in a way that I think just staying in the same place might not. And I'm not saying like you'd have to do it. I'm just saying like usually I think it's a positive experience to go experience the world, see something different,
For
hear
sure.
from all these different people from different backgrounds, and then you come back and you can bring a lot of that wealth into your community. But of course, like I do think like it is important that we sort of have or that we encourage them to come back and bring the wealth, which is something that I'm trying to do now, right? Like it's like I didn't necessarily think like, oh, I have to leave to be, successful or whatever. I just felt like, oh, there's this opportunity out there that is obviously not offered here at the moment. I graduated from UTB, and at that point, I think there wasn't even a PhD program or anything yet. It was sort of still like being shaped. So when I got an opportunity, or like music, for example, that I was like, I wanted to, tour and do all these different things. There was a much more active scene elsewhere. So I went over there, I did that for a while, did a PhD, did that for a while. And now I'm back here, and all these talents and things, and experiences that I've developed, I want to use them in a place that before didn't have them. And the goal is that we build that thing that I was maybe lacking or that I didn't know existed, that we build it here, and then people like might actually want to come here and like improve that scene. I think it's a little bit of what is happening now. Like I don't know that people have to leave to get it anymore. They can actually start building it here, but they definitely do get a certain wealth of experience if they leave and then actually return.
Yeah. So let's stay on that. So you said the campaign isn't about you, but it's about building a movement. What does that movement look like specifically here for like South Texas?
Well, we same as like going back to like the youthful perspective. We have always like been told, and I've been told even like by especially by older generations of like, oh, that's not the way. Like Texans are more conservative, or like people in the valley are more conservative. They're not going to vote like this, or they're not going to like that, or this platform isn't viable here. And that's just kind of a way of putting the cart before the horse. Like you're basically telling you shouldn't be telling people what they are or what they think. You should just be like, this is my set of ideas that I know like work elsewhere and that actually have like a solid foundational like basis. I am bringing it here because I know that the same problems that they've solved elsewhere, it like can be solved here. And when you are giving them that option, then they start to maybe explore it and think about it in a different way rather than just that option not being offered to them because somebody decided, no, they're not going to go for this at all. Or, maybe they don't even know it exists either. They just want to stick to the script. So, I think like in South Texas, we are in an environment that sometimes like gets a little closed off and like like we are encouraged sometimes by the people in power, the system that it exists, to sort of like turn off your imagination. um, and what I'm trying to do here, what I'm trying to build here, is this notion that a lot of the problems that we face here, they're universal. Like people have them everywhere. Like we're not like necessarily just we're unique like every person is, but we're not alone in it. And there are allies beyond this that share our struggles. I mean, the recent video that I put up, which was like the SpaceX uh, video of the launch, that one has been, just blowing up, right? And I think it obviously just hasn't been people from the valley. It's been people outside of it that see that know that their community might be experiencing a very similar thing of a billionaire stepping in, taking over their economy, taking over their resources, and then their voice just being suppressed and silenced, and all of these problems that they have caused also just going into the background. And here, when you do that, when you actually like start bringing that relationship together, then you can also connect these like-minded progressive minds to a broader, greater movement that is fighting to not just like address those issues, but also like roll back fascism as a whole, which is not just like a confined phenomenon. It's going to affect us all. So I think the part of building a movement really relates to, let's reach this critical mass that actually connects with these movements that have happened elsewhere and add our voice to it. And that's where we're at. I think there's a lot of people that have naturally gravitated towards what the campaign is doing just because it views the things that I've been putting out there as issues that address their problems and that have before not been offered to them.
Yeah. I can't imagine what happens after somebody gets elected, right? So obviously there's the campaign trail, the campaign promises, you're talking to everybody, you're telling them what you're gonna do. How do we keep politicians in line? Like once they've already been elected, they've made all the promises, this is what we're gonna do, we're gonna put this into policy. How do we make sure that they're following through with these things once they're already elected?
So I think like people like you or but even the public themselves, like they need to demand, for example, regular town halls. I think my opponent, Vicente Gonzalez, I think he's only done like one town hall in the past. I mean, this is a moment of crisis where all of these things are coming to a head, where our community is being raided, where environmental devastation is happening. And having one town hall in this moment is just, it's political malpractice. It basically means you're sort of hiding from these realities that people are, looking to leadership for. So demanding those kinds of things, like, go online, call them, do whatever you need to do to get your voice out there, protest, do all these things to make them feel that pressure. And I expect actually when I'm elected that people do the same for me. Like if I'm not holding to these campaign promises that they ask me and they demand, like, where are these results? To show me that you've been moving towards that goal and what you've been doing there. Like where are your speeches on the floor? Where are like your policy initiatives? where are your offices where I can go and talk to people? Where are your town halls where you tell me what it is that you've been doing with my vote, right? So I really do think like we also need to get into the culture in the valley, which I think I understand that it hasn't been something that we've been used to because we've been marginalized for so long from the discourse. But we need to get into the habit of viewing democracy as this like active form of government, participatory government that is not just like going and voting, but actually on a daily basis, maybe not on a daily because I know you have like things to do, but on a regular basis that you hold the government accountable, that you go to the town halls, that you ask questions, that you demand like some kind of accountability, because that's the only way democracy works if our elected officials are held accountable for what they're doing.
Cool, man. Well, I appreciate your time, man. Everybody, thank you so much, man. Yeah, we talked about so much stuff. How can people find you?
So you can go to my website, which is either rosasforcongress.com or etienneforcongress.com. That's where I have all the policy platform. You can volunteer there. You can donate to the Act Blue. We really need the donations, like I said, because it's a grassroots campaign. We're up against like people who have a lot of money from corporate actors and like super PACs. And in our case, we're only doing it with the help of volunteers and whatever people are willing to chip in. So everything really goes a long way. But I would also love to see people on the campaign trail. So feel free to reach out, tell me your story. And if you want to pitch in any other way, we're all open to it. Like should be also their campaign. They should feel like their voice will be transmitted in my campaign. So go to etienneforcongress.com, rosasforcongress.com, or shoot us an email at team@etienneforcongress.com, and we'll get back to you whenever we, soonest moment we can. But yeah, well, thank you so much for the space, and I hope to be back soon.
Awesome. We'll see y'all soon. Have a great day.
Bye,
Bye.
everyone.